And with that, I introduced you to Anushka and Nirvaan. Over to you guys. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Anushka Prakash. I'm a 16-year-old from Calcutta and an incoming junior at Wellham Girls School in Dehradun. Music has been an extremely integral part of my life now, right from when I was little. I've been playing the piano for almost 10 years now, and I've completed the grade 8 ABRSM level. Music inspires me, and I hope to one day use it to bring a positive change to the world.
Thank you.
So hi, my name is Nirvaan Pandit, and I'm a grade 11 student at the American School of Bombay. Like Anushka, I have grown up with music almost as a sibling, playing and performing guitar from the age of 6. And over the years, I've taken my personal passion for music, translating it into a music therapy program I run called TheraTunes, which helps children of all mental capabilities express and develop themselves through music. It's a great honor to meet you, Professor.
No, great, cool, thank you.
The first kind of question I wanted to ask was about your early musical influences and how you kind of decided to undertake this journey of blending your passion of computer science and music to find sound to musicate everything and everyday events.
Yeah, great. Okay, that's a great question. Kind of biography related. So, the first thing I'm going to say, because I get a little bit of a floor here for where I can maybe make a bit of advice, which is it'll be reflected in my own path, I think. But it's it's difficult to see what's coming. It's good to be lucky, and you want to discover things by thinking, with a very open mind, So in my case, what I would say, well, first of all, very lucky because I have, incredible parents who also had music in in their lives and shared that with the kids and the family, no doubt, and both are teachers also. So that side of things is a strong vein in our family. The earliest stage, that's kind of relevant to this would be, very, very far back when, my mom encouraged me to be part of a group that played those little plastic flutes. And, they weren't even really good recorder type flutes. They were just little song flutes. I think that was the name, trademark, who knows. But that's kind of relevant to Ron, your idea that you can provide music to people in many ways. You can reach them through their ears and their collective experience when they play in a group. It's an awesome transcendental thing for even little kids, like I was a little kid playing very simple melodies in a group, and that that has a little bit to do with forming your ears. Well, by grade 4, at least my generation, there was always this kind of like the school music program opens its door and, come back next week with this little card filled out that says which instrument you'd like to play. And we had options for orchestral instruments. My dad played clarinet, so I wanted to play clarinet. Right? And my dad said, no way, you can't do the same thing. So let's pick another instrument. Begins with the letter C. Cello, how about that? Okay. Well, those are lucky moments, right? I basically they handed me a cello and I haven't let go since. It's really become, a medium for me in so many ways, that's for sure. Same time, and I think like probably I share this passion with a lot of you that, I'm inquisitive about, technology and science. And this is also my parents too. They mixed in science as well in their teaching and their research. And so the milieu for, being a kid, like a 12-year-old kid who's building radios, but playing cello, all of that, with some amount of my parents' support, but like if I was building radios with 1,000 volts, and there was smoke coming out, and they were attached to pieces of wood in my bedroom, they would get a little concerned, as they should. But finally, I find myself now in a really lucky situation because I came of age in my own practice when digital means for making music were just starting to hatch. There was a wide open field. It still is, I gotta say. It's very wide open. So don't let me fool you about anything from my past saying, okay, it was a wide open field. You could make mistakes galore and have fun and meet people. It's still that way. It really is. But in the earliest days of music and computing, really basic stuff had to happen. And I was very fortunate to be, to a couple different universities where some of that was cooking, experimentally. There was a lot of analog music synthesis going on at the time. Analog meaning, basically radio circuitry applied to making funny sounds with loudspeakers attached. And they became instruments. I mean, there was the Moog synthesizer, very, very famous. Wendy Carlos's album switched on Bach. It was playing Bach on oscillators and doing it very, very, very beautifully with, all the expression you would imagine from mechanical instruments. So that was a groundbreaking LP years and years ago that people who have a copy still hold it up and say, look, this is what this is what got me going. Well, I didn't have that. And I was kind of, I was still kind of dismayed about the kind of delta, the difference between what mechanical instruments could do and what you could do electronically. It was different worlds. And so I tried combining those worlds in a program in the University of California in San Diego, which had an experimental music degree program. I did my master's studies there in composition because by then I was starting to, sort of translate my experimental things into, hey, let's try and combine these sounds. Let's try and play these funny things with different technologies and different ways of incorporating musicians. I got really lucky there too, got to say. Professors, one in particular who was a total surprise. The person I had went to study with was on sabbatical the first year. So here you get to work with this other professor, Pauline Oliveras. Unbelievable. Oh man, she turned my head around in terms of how I hear music, how I hear sound, what is music. I think some of your questions really go in that direction, which I love that we'll explore that a little bit. But first thing to put a pin in is the history of music in the USA, influenced by Pauline Oliveras. Really spectacular moment in time, and there is a generation there of like-minded musicians combining influences from Europe and American improvisation scene and philosophy and Eastern philosophy in particular, and a lot of that all kind of shaping in the 1960s. So I got to catch some of the tail end of that stuff when I was in San Diego. This is a long-winded biography, but I'm almost there. So, so that program, it doesn't today act like this, but it was really fortuitous for me that you could do a master program by combining different elements, and you had to choose 3 elements in order to put your program together. And I chose composition, performance, and technology. And that allowed me to, kind of do what I was already doing, but get academic credit for it and study with some great people and have the resources I needed. So I learned about things like spectrum analysis of sounds from my cello. That was my master's thesis, in fact. It's like, looking at all the different ways you can actually sound the same note on a cello, which is something I was experimenting with my composition, but now I had tools where I could, look at that digitally. Very, very early in that, the sort of practice of that, where today it's very commonplace. If I said, okay, pick your instrument, and we just heard from pianists and so, hook a microphone up to a computer, run Audacity, free open source software, record a tone, turn on the spectrum analyzer in Audacity, and you can see brilliant differences in how you shape a note, and it's all stuff that we hear. So a little harder to do back then, but I was in a lucky place to be able to do that. That led me to eventually joining the group at Stanford, where a lot of this work was being also pursued. Small group that was founded within the context of the Artificial Intelligence Laboratory. And this was a group of, really brilliant colleagues I came to study my doctorate with in composition. I'll mention John Chowning, who was the founding director of the center where I'm now the director. Along with John, there were 4 co-founders. One was his professor, Leland Smith, a composer in the music department, a computer scientist named Andy Moore, a psychologist named John Gray, another composer named Lauren Rush. And the 5 of them basically took this technology forward, learning how to program, learning what it meant for music, and sharing all this stuff widely. And it was a time in the kind of late, the 70s into the 80s, where things were still mainframe computer, very rare, like hard to get a hold of the facilities you needed. Like even getting a sound into a computer today, it's trivial, but then it was very special purpose hardware that was built by the group and so on. So the democratization of that part, the facilities, has been a product of, the inevitable engineering that goes on in society. Things get made, they get replicated, they get cheaper, they get smaller, they get cooler, which is a good thing, and and they become ubiquitous, right? And if we say that happened to here's a digital analog converter, very high quality. It's a Zoom USB audio interface with a microphone goes in and headphones and stuff. $100, right? And then this device has all of that stuff too, and it runs at ridiculously high sampling rates, and that's the case in point. What about capturing brain waves, which we'll talk about at some point? That's always been in the medical realm something that required very special apparatus to get high quality signals. You have to glue on lots of electrodes, and only the trained people can get it up to that level that they need, particularly in diagnosis field. Will that get to the point where you can just put on something like this and monitor high quality brainwave activity, for all sorts of reasons, medical, but otherwise, you can imagine if my headphones were also transducers for my brainwaves, kind of cool. And what if I turn my head and the gyroscopic tracking also is there? Man, you think I'm talking science fiction? Nope. This is now, and it's not available in the stores yet, but not far away, I should say. So all of these kinds of things. And Manu, I see your hand up.
Oh no, I was just clapping at that. I love it. It's absolutely perfect. In fact, Professor Fujioka at CCRMA, I actually put the EEG cap on my head, and we did multiple neurological studies like 4 years ago. It was awesome.
Awesome. Yeah, what's changed now is that I was talking about portable, easier to assemble. During last year, Dr. Fujioka obtain dry electrode sets, which don't have to do all of that stuff that you learned how to do, I'm sure.
I had to get a haircut. I lost hair. I had to put glue inside. It was all worth it for the site. So it was
Right. Yeah. After every session, you have to wash your hair, and no longer. So the feasibility increases on all of these kinds of things. Anyway, final biographical thing to say is that opportunities presented themselves in my life. There was this frontier that related to my interests, both artistic and scientific, and I, above all, was lucky to land in a group of really, really excited and exciting and friendly and sharing colleagues who have the same passion, right? And those are great places to be, always. And whether they're academic or whether they're in a corporate environment or whether apart from that, they're just collectives of individuals who are working together out of passion, in whatever realm, music, technology, science. It's so much easier nowadays to do this at a distance, sharing groups, like we're doing right now. And I think the lesson of the pandemic is that it's just opened up this distance idea, that it makes it just as easy. It makes it easier to do our conversation today than for me to actually have to pop in a car, get in traffic, go down to, a place where people are still hesitant to come back and teach a class, right? It's a no-brainer for me. I think we've learned a lot about collaboration and distance. Anyway, okay, enough about me.
Yeah, I think I should point out that you find it interesting that my dad also plays the clarinet and my mom is also a music teacher. So I think that to some extent, I can relate to the kind of environment you're brought up in. I mean, all of my siblings have some kind of musical passion that they're pursuing. And I think that if you grow up in an environment where you have that kind of support, not necessarily in music, but in any field that kind of love is shared between, like you said, with your colleagues and also your family. I think that definitely has a profound impact on how far you pursue that passion. So I do think that I do share a bit of a similarity in that sense.
Great.
But over to you, Anushka. I do think you have a question.
Thank you, Nirvaan. In 1992, the US composer John Cage said, "There's no noise, only sound." You've worked with the musification of natural phenomena like light, temperature, humidity, noise, and carbon dioxide levels for some time now, and created sounds out of them. When does a noise turn into music? Or can we consider all the sounds we hear in our day-to-day lives as music?
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you, Anushka. That's a wonderful John Cage quote, which really ties into the other composer I was talking about, Pauline Oliveros. And if you're interested in this, you can find a lot about her work online, no doubt about it. And John Cage, when he talks about noise and sound and everything being music, I'd have you think about where the difference is actually being registered. So the sound is out there. It's the natural world. Let's start with that anyway, and say that the sounds are out there in the natural world. And what you refer to in my work is, kind of like digitally tapping into some of the behaviors in the natural world. One thing that we might want to stipulate at the beginning is something about sound itself. Sound is, I pretty much like to think sound is coupled to motion, right? So if something moves, there's likely some kind of sound that could be registered, and all sounds kind of come from that. Well, to kind of first degree, anyway, you could maybe say that's the case in the natural world. with our sensors and actuators, we can dig in kind of deeper than just physical motion. Now we can, even brain waves, if we're going to listen to the brain like that, what's moving? Well, it is electrochemical motion. There are, you could get into the deep layers of the biology and say, maybe there is kind of motion that we're registering. Anyway, something changes in the world where John Cage is. Those changes are typically motion, mechanical motion or natural motion. When he says noise, I kind of have a little corollary to what John Cage says there. That, and this is from physics. What is noise in a physics experiment? What are you? When you say, okay, here's the signal, this is the behavior that we're measuring, we've got something that we can explain, and then there's this noise, there's like a certain amount of error in our experiment, but we got explanatory data, then we got this other stuff, and we'll just sweep that under the rug and call it noise, right? So the term noise is a little bit fraught, and my interpretation would be that noise is just the part that we don't understand. Like we're sweeping it under the rug. If we had a better explanation, if we peeled the layers of our understanding like an onion and we get closer and closer to a better explanation, some of that noise, less has to be swept under the rug because we're incorporating in our models. So noise is an interesting concept. But if I say there's a lot of street noise, and maybe that relates to John Cage, it's like, okay, can you listen in a way where you kind of tune into that street noise and its behavior becomes something you appreciate. You can predict, you can identify what's in there, you can kind of absorb yourself. It's almost like opening up the filters in your ears beyond this sort of just raucous, busy stuff that's extraneous to your life. You actually incorporate it for a moment. You open your ears, and that's what John Cage is talking about. Is that opening your ears? You start to, kind of widen your connections to things. And Pauline Oliveras' work was all about that. She eventually became very known for training in deep listening. And I think that relates very much. I think Pauline and John were talking about the same thing. In fact, I know they were. And that was a revolution in music that happened in the 60s, as I was talking about. And I was kind of fortunate, as I said, to be there kind of tail end of that and pick up on some of what these pioneers in listening had come up with, and that's pretty spectacular. What are the resonances of that today? Is it easy for us to say that there's been a transformation where, we can all kind of vibe out and just listen, open our filters and listen? I don't know how commonplace that is. I don't know if that's taught widely, but I think it is in Eastern philosophy. I think there's a real strong tie to, a world there, which is not my world. I don't know it, but I appreciate it, right? Like I would not claim to have any strong guidance I can give on that, but I do know it through the music, and I know through, connections with other musicians worldwide, that it's really easy to go to that place in music together. I do a lot of real-time music improvisation, and some of that is at a distance. Again, something that's becoming easier and easier to do. And if I connect with musicians across the world I've never met, but we're going to play a gig together, and I'm here in my room playing cello or another instrument, but someone else, in a different place, playing at the same time. And we haven't talked about what our music is, right? But it's more and more commonplace that you can do very, very noisy things. if sort of use that again, noisy things that are now considered kind of musical objects in the music that you play. And that's stupendous. And you don't have to talk about it. That's the cool thing. People's ears are tuned in to kind of listen into unusual, musically unusual behaviors in new music. And that's where a lot of the experimentation is. I would suggest it's becoming easier because of musical distribution also. Like you can listen to what's going on, in the work of musicians across the globe at an instant. That kind of access that, stupendous for the evolution of music. Where does that relate in my life? I was doing improvisation by the time I was kind of in high school. In fact, cello player. Okay. And in our middle school, they had a jazz band and they didn't have a bass player. So the jazz teacher sort of took a contrabass and he stuck it in my other hand, said, okay, you're going to be the bass player. So I got kind of into it. And there was even there's my bass. And the realm of now learning to improvise, kind of opened up to me. And so that went back to my cello. I started to play jazz cello, which is kind of an anomaly, right? You think about jazz, you don't really often think about cello. But there's a lot of instruments that were starting to be incorporated into, jazz and improvised music and black music in the USA, which became foundational in my life. So I became part of a lot of experimental music improv ensembles, and particularly, in the realm of experimental music, black music. Got lucky there too, played with some astounding musicians who shaped my life when I was 18, and that to this day, I've been really stoked by the fact that the kind of places that were possible to go, but were very rare back in that point, when I'm 18, 20, 22 years old, are the things I can do now with, new associates online across the world. And we get audiences. So what's happened? It's changed. Music has changed. And, is it if you look at music history, we talk about something called common practice. It's sort of a very Western heavy, European heavy description of musical practice that you can find in music theory textbooks, right? So sure, we can look at all of the great music and analyze it, look at the music theory that tries to explain it. Analysis is kind of an art itself. It's not like the type of science we're talking about in physics and psychology. It's interpretation, and it's interesting that we found today a realm where those kinds of interpretations are no longer sacrosanct. They are considered to be perspectives, and opening those perspectives to incorporate music across the world, and then in time also, like deeper in time, because we have more and more traces to music before recording, before music scores, before, the whole world of archaeo-musical studies is opening up now, through a lot of science, actually. So going that way is cool. But then to finally answer your question, noise again, and how does that become music? I'm an omnivore. I think you probably figured that out. Like I just like all music. I mean, always looking for new flavors. And, they change what I do, and I'm, wide open about that. And one place you can go is with sonification or musification or whatever. I kind of made up that musification word just because it didn't exist. I don't know. It's not really a word, but it's the idea that you would use digital means to be able to incorporate extra musical signals, behaviors from, like brainwaves, as we've been talking about, or it could be from long data records, which we can't really even appreciate because they're so long, right? And so what do? You have to compress them and speed them up and then listen to them. So a speeded up version of, the carbon dioxide levels is really interesting to listen to. And it, is it music? Well, there's two worlds, and we'll probably get onto that question. Let me hold it with just that question: is it music? and my colleague at CCRMA here, Gu Wang, when you ask him, he says, "I'll know it when I hear it," which is good enough for me.
So on this topic of sonification, or as you like to call it, musification, and opening our ears to kind of filtering noise from this cacophony of information we receive when listening not only to conventional music, but really to anything. I wanted to talk to you about your diagnosis of acoustic latency. So your research at CCRMA examines these challenges that musicians are facing nowadays with virtual synchrony, which in a time like this is so crucial given the creation of music is at such a high. I think that was something you were talking about. And you've helped imagine a couple of really impressive performances over this quarantine time period, including a few played by the Cronus Quartet over quarantine. And I was wondering, in a time where we are separated only by digital frequencies, how have quarantine and COVID-19 both forced this improvement of acoustic latency, and where do we see the use of this kind of technology in the future?
Yeah, well posed question, and we'll first of all say this goes back to Chris, the kid who was like playing with radios and being trained on cello at the same time, where I had a fascination for long haul stuff with radios, and that's the ham radio world is just like all about building your kits and then talking to other people. Now I get to do that with music. It's just, feel like many decades later, I'm still doing the same thing, and it's still kind of fun. Anyway, so that relates to the very first Chris biography question and the fact that somehow this appeared. Well, I'll tell you how it appeared. Is kind of a decent story worth, I don't know. Manu, I want to double check on our timing. So did you say this is 2 hours?
We can go for as long as you want. We have time.
No, yeah, I just don't want to, I don't want to lose my audience in the
You will not lose us at all. We can go for 2 hours. We will be very happy with that, Professor.
Okay, well, let's make that a limit, certainly, because it's probably late there, right? So.
That's okay. We're having a lot of fun and we can go on. People in the audience can leave. We're not going to hold you hostage, but Nirvaan, Anushka, and I will be here to listen, and this is being recorded. So we can always, we'll timestamp it and share it with our students. So absolutely, yes, we can go for 2 hours.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Well, I'll try. I don't know if I'll go that long, but let's see how it goes. And anyway, just to know that, because now I'm going to tell a little bit of an involved story. Around the year 1999, thereabouts, let's see how to best say that. I got a wake-up call, literally one of those wake-up calls from somebody who, got a hold of me and suggested something that I had. My brain was, I hadn't been thinking about at all. And her name is Elizabeth Cohen, Betsy Cohen. graduate from Stanford who worked in the hearing and speech department in the medical school. It was no longer exists, but was also a place where a lot of acoustics was studied. And Betsy Cohen became a professional acoustician and eventually the president of an international organization called the Audio Engineering Society. So AES, and AES is, as I said, it's worldwide. It has tens of thousands of members who are, first of all, music producers, studio owners, all the way to the industry of, making musical instruments and recording, and a lot of standards about how, acoustics is pursued. Anyway, the Audio Engineering Society, and they were having their fall meeting in San Francisco. And it's a big meeting with, like 10,000 people, one of the trade meetings like that scope. At the same time, coincidentally, the USA consortium is called Internet 2. And this is the consortium of research universities, research labs that are connected by high-speed networks. And Internet 2, the name says it, right? It's sort of like next generation internet. And they were having their fall members meeting also in San Francisco, across the street from AES. Total coincidence. And at the time, there were a few people, not me, who were thinking about what would happen if we tried to put professional audio in real time across the internet. And this is, over 2 decades ago. It's pretty awesome that this topic had arisen at that point. In fact, the White House at that time had commissioned a white paper, so-called, studying that feasibility. They'd commissioned a few people to look at the potential of next generation internets for audio. And this is in the time where we really barely had file sharing in the world of commodity internet, let alone anything approaching the data rates that we're talking about. So anyway, beautiful light bulb goes off in Betsy's head. She says, hey, maybe since there's coincidence, we could have a session where we get the audio engineers and the network engineers together just to talk about that for a meeting while everybody's in town. And so she called back to CCRMA where I was and said, hey, you should be there and you should demo something. I didn't even know what she was talking about. So this was a really cool suggestion though. And literally, sometimes you're in the shower and a thing connects. And I was working at the time on physical models for music synthesis. And I think you probably understand physical modeling in, like in computer graphics. If you want to have an avatar that has a certain behavior, one way to get a kind of, humanistic type of behavior in the motion of an avatar is to add physics to it. And, commonplace now, if you're going to move projectiles through space, well, you add the physics of ballistics to it and so on. And so in music, physical modeling synthesis is really essentially taking the equations of motion of how sound is produced in an instrument, using that as a model that you can run to produce sound in a computer. And it's really easy to explain that, a very simple kind of first principles guitar string. If you imagine a stretched string, okay, so here we got a string, and at the beginning, it's at rest. There's no motion, there's no sound. But what happens when we pluck it? Like that. that impulse travels in both ways on the string. And if it bounces off one side, it goes to the other side, and it's recirculating like this, right? Until it dies out. And the time of travel, that round trip, is what gives you the pitch of the string, right? So here's a thought experiment. You've got a stretch string, you can pluck it. How do you change the pitch? You know, and this is for all the guitarists out there. What is it? Or, you know, any stretch string instrument, cello, you know, I play also dilruba. I don't know if you know dilruba. It's a beautiful instrument, my most cherished instrument. Anyway, so all of them behave the same. A single string stretched like that, you change the pitch, first of all, by just making the string longer or shorter. You know, a short string has a higher pitch, and that's because of the round trip, higher frequency, like that, you know, and as it goes longer, then you have a low frequency. Okay, that's first way to change. Second way is you have a tuning mechanism. And on a guitar, it's a, you know, on a lot of them, it's a peg that you just tighten, right? And so now you're changing the tensile strength or the tension on the string. And the tighter it is, the faster impulse will travel on it. So what are we changing there? We're actually changing the speed of sound in the medium, right? So as it gets tighter, the medium transmits sound faster and the pitch goes up. And if you slack off the string, you know, you can imagine now the wave takes a longer time. It's relaxed, right? Okay, there's, you know, to complete the quiz, there's a third way. And that's the difference between strings of different gauges. So a heavy string, and you can imagine a piano string like this, because there's some big beefy strings on pianos. And the mass of the string also lowers the pitch if it gets heavier, right? And so that's why low strings, to get them in the same space of the piano box, to get the low pitches, you increase the mass of the string. So what does that have to do with the internet and physical models? Well, my you know, moment after the, you know, the invitation from Betsy was, hey, I'm working on physical models of stretch strings, and I'm running them in a computer program. And where am I getting the time delay for the travel? I'm doing that all in computer memory, so-called delay lines. It's just an algorithm that you run in a computer program. Really easy to understand a delay line. You know, you have an array, you put something in, and it just hops along. Every audio sample, it just ticks along until it comes out the other side. So the length of the array, how many cells it has, determines how long it takes to go across the string. and to make it a string, well, all you have to do is take the output, feed it back to the input, and mix it in. So now there's a round trip. And that was happening in delay line algorithm in computer memory. And I thought, well, what if we do that on the internet? The internet has delay. So let's just shoot a sound into the internet. When it gets to the other side, send it back to the, you know, to the originator, and let them mix it back in, and it'll just loop around on the internet. So, so the idea of plucking the internet, like plucking a guitar string, and went ahead with that, got kind of into it. And so I started building physical models where the delay line memory was actually the network. And you know, by coincidence almost, I would say that the pitch range that we like to sort of hear in our musical instruments is conveniently within the ranges of network distances across the planet. If I make a connection to, let's see, my, I did a demo of this recently from my home to a desktop computer at Stanford on my in my office, like there's a machine there, and I just echo the sound back and I recirculate it around. It was a pitch that was higher than the lowest string of my cello, if that makes sense. So, and here's the brilliant thing though, is that I said I did it from home. And this is what's new about now and the pandemic and all of that was we were doing all of this experimentation on the research networks, supported by Internet 2, but not just Internet 2, all around the world. There are research network consortia, and in Canada, it's called Canary. In Europe, it's called Géant. There's a Trans-Pacific one, Asian one. So they all have these high-speed networks, and we weren't making physical model plucking string type things. We were actually starting to use the same streaming mechanism just to connect audio and play together, right? So if you're going to do the stretch string experiment, pluck the internet, you need to have a streaming of uncompressed audio. You need a streaming algorithm that runs on the network. So we built that as part of it. We actually got a research grant that supported building all this stuff because I proposed this idea of listening to plucking the network as a way of assessing the quality of service of a network connection. And I got funding for the project from the National Science Foundation back in year 2000, and had a nice period of a few years working with some students to build this up, start experimenting, and then we started playing concerts because we had this great streaming thing. But okay, enter now when we all went into lockdown, the first time I did this with somebody seriously from home was in it was in March 2020. And a colleague in Milan, Italy, she sang Amazing Grace, and she was in her home, and I played an accompaniment here at my house on cello, and we did it, and it had some lag, and this is where this comes into the question of those delays, right? So Christina wanted to do this. I'd just been in Europe working with her I was on sabbatical just prior to the pandemic, and as northern Italy went into crazy lockdown kind of right after Wuhan, and that was when I left and came back to California. My contract was up, but all the work I'd been doing was related, and Christina wanted to do this at the same time that there was this really strong feeling that music would play a role in keeping people together, and sane during the lockdowns. And you find it in media from back in March, April of 2020 in Italy, in Milan. You see videos of people going out onto their balconies. They're all locked down, and there's these streets lined with apartments and people on balconies singing together. During the very first weeks of the pandemic, as a kind of salve to just the isolation, right? What do you do if all of a sudden all the ensembles in the world are now out of luck, right? Nobody can get together. You can't play music together. You can't sing together, except for going out on your balcony, right? And at Stanford, we started a group to explore what would it take to get our local ensembles, up and running so that we could teach, orchestra and chorus and lessons on instruments and so on. So I started a class at Stanford called the Internet Engineering. I'm sorry, not engineering. The Internet Ensemble Tech Force, IETF. And there was a play on acronyms where there is an IETF that's very important worldwide. It's the Internet Engineering Task Force. And the IETF is the volunteer organization that holds the standards that run the internet in its hands. And whenever there's going to be a new feature in the protocols that run over the network, those are vetted as drafts and experimental projects. These features become standards over time through the process of assessment that goes on in the worldwide IETF. Well, I created an IETF for our music department just so we could get people experimenting with connecting ensembles from home together. And we knew that if we could do it from home, we could probably get reasonably decent performances going that would be, essentially as if you were playing together in the same room. And, back to this idea of delay now. So if I'm, we were talking about the speed of sound on a string, but now let's talk about speed of sound between two musicians who are in a room together. And they're separated by 3 meters. Okay, imagine 3 meters. It's a reasonable distance in a room where you're going to play music together. The speed of sound in air will take about 10 milliseconds from one person playing over to the ears of the person that's listening, and that's one way. So the round trip would be 20 milliseconds. And so we experimented in the laboratory back in the early 2000s to see, if that's one way 10 milliseconds, we make it longer and longer. At what point is it difficult to play a good tight synchronous musical passage together? And we did it in the laboratory. We did it with a clapping rhythm and lots and lots of people taking part in the trials. We, grew a whole database of people clapping this rhythm, and we found that there is no magic number. Interestingly, it's not a thing where you have just a breakout, a knee in the data that says, okay, beyond this certain point, you can't play music. What happens is, as you go out, there's this kind of place where the ability to synchronize starts to taper off. And when it tapers off in the clapping experiment, what happens is the tempo starts to drag. It slows down. And you can think of that because as algorithmic terms, you could say, I'm waiting for you, you're waiting for me, and it's a recursion, right? So if we're not waiting, if we're all kind of like in there together, everything functions. I always make this kind of, I think of the rhythms as being oscillators, right? And so in a good way, these oscillators are coupled and they're tight. And then as you increase the delay, the tightness starts to get a little bit sloppy until you get so far apart, you can't do it. But there's no magic number that says where that is because, first of all, it depends on the tempo of the oscillation. So faster tempi require a little bit tighter delay. Ambient music can be pretty sloshy and still be very together in terms of the music, right? So it's there's a lot of things in there that say it depends. It's a noisy answer. Sorry about that. But the exciting thing was we did find a kind of sweet spot, which said, for tempos that are kind of in there for a lot of music that you want to maintain, somewhere on the order of 25 to 30 milliseconds would be kind of an outside limit. Now go back to the 3 meters. 3 meters is 10 milliseconds. So 9 meters away. How often do you play with somebody in a room spaced out by 9 meters? Well, in an orchestra, you might. Orchestras are big. Orchestras have a conductor. And, some orchestras don't, but for a lot of purposes, synchrony is aided by visual cues. And those are running at the speed of light, not the speed of sound, right? So boom, it's really good. Hence, anyway, we thought in our IETF experiments in our small working group that was this course at Stanford in the first teaching during lockdown. This is spring quarter at Stanford in 2020. We wanted to see if we could get our ensembles below the 30 millisecond level, one way 30 milliseconds from home together. And we did. And that was a revelation because, I mean, for my part, I had not been doing anything from home. All of this, online music work had been done on the research network, the internet too. And when the house that I'm in right now, I moved here 8 years ago, and there was this is common in the USA. I don't know. I think India, you have a lot more DSL for connectivity. I don't know if you have cable so much. What we have is repurposed television broadcast cable system that companies started running internet data on. So we call it, cable internet. Anyway, there was one of those hanging between trees up on my property here. And I plugged it in when I moved here. And, the data rate's about like 40 megabit down and 15 megabits up or something like that. It's asynchronous like usual. And I couldn't do the streaming that we're talking about out of my house 8 years ago. And one channel of this professional quality audio that we're talking about is about 1 megabit per second. So stereo, you need 2 megabits plus maybe a little more, So let's just say, let's double it. Let's say we want to have 4 megabits coming in. We want to have 4 megabits coming out. Now we've got at least 2 decent channels. But it's not about the megabits so much. You remember I said mine is like 40 by 15 or something. It's way over that. But it didn't work. And it didn't work because the packet flow through the network is very stuttery. It what you would like to have is very even packet. But what you get is bunches, a bunch of packets, and there's a gap. And that's called jitter. And if you have too much jitter, you can't keep up. And my first, 8 years ago, I just tried it and I said, oh yeah, nowhere near. And then 8 years later, we're in the pandemic. Well, 7 years later, we're in the pandemic. I tried it again and it worked, and I could get 4 channels, and I didn't change anything. So here's the rub. Same provider, it's called Comcast. Same plan, not paying any more money than I started paying 8 years ago. And it just got better by itself. Why? Because of video streaming, because there's a whole industry there broadcasting TV over networks in internet protocol. So to keep their business, they basically had to make the quality of service acceptable for Netflix, and they did. It's my suspicion. I haven't talked to anybody at Comcast, but it's got to be the reason. So over time, and we were talking way back about how there's a kind of pressure in engineering to make things better and cheaper and smaller. Well, that's happened in the internet as well. And it's going to keep happening. It's going to happen in 5G. We're going to have wireless quality of service that matches what we can do with wires. Right now, Wi-Fi is a tricky thing. We don't use it for the musical streaming that I'm talking about. Others, with a lot of compression and lag and things, you can use Wi-Fi, but too many of those big gaps, between bursts of packets when you do it over radio. Anyway, back to 30 milliseconds and the Stanford Symphony Orchestra. So we, I'll show you something. We combined little Raspberry Pi computers, which look like that and cost $50 and can run the software that we created just fine. We combined those with very high quality audio interfaces, which cost $100. And we gave all the musicians a good microphone, had them connect their home networks, and lo and behold, we had ensembles online. It took a bit of work and a lot of contribution from some companies to, I couldn't build an orchestra's worth of kits like that myself. So we worked with a friend of mine named Bharani Subbiya, and he runs a company called Network Sound in Sacramento, California. And Bharani and I have been doing network audio engineering for a couple decades together. And during the pandemic, his business, which would be concert hall network audio and broadcast, fell apart because there were no concerts. And that's the story for a lot of the companies associated with the Audio Engineering Society, for example. Like their whole business had to change, during this crazy time. And so anyway, got Bharani's help building up these kits, and we sent them around. And then there was also another company started by the father of one of the singers in the Ragazzi Boys Choir in the San Francisco Bay Area. And this is a couple hundred singers, high school age and earlier boys who regularly rehearse and then have concert season and stuff. And Mike Dickey is a network engineer and thought maybe there would be a solution like this, started looking for it and found our project and joined our small working group, showed us what he was going to do with Raspberry Pis as well. And then that took off beautifully. So we're collaborating today and providing similar solutions now kind of as a commercial solution for choirs. But there's some great footage of like 100 singers up and down California, all on one enormous Zoom screen, singing together, but it's not fake. It's real. They're all doing it real time from their home. And the 30 milliseconds in the state of California, we can keep it within that, which is pretty spectacular. And we are using the commodity internet now. We're using cloud service for the gathering point. Like if you connect from home, you want to connect to the other people, and you can either do that directly, or if you're going to grow a big circuit with an orchestra or a choir, it's better to have a central hub and everybody joins their sound there. And we can do that and still stay within the kind of that cutoff that I said wasn't a real firm cutoff, but we can keep it close. So that's it. So anyway, I think I talked about delay a lot, and there's a lot of papers about this and sound examples that you could, explore deeper if you care to. So we're not making it very fast through your list of questions. And that's,
no, but thank you so much. Yeah. That was a masterclass. Yeah. Like I was just thinking, an absolute masterclass. We really appreciate it. Anushka has a question next. Anushka, over to you.
Thank you, Manu. I've always been fascinated with how similar music tastes can be across borders, and sometimes how different they can be. South Korea regularly blasts K-pop music at North Korea from its border to illustrate the difference between K-pop's vibrance and the more traditional North Korean songs. Recently, I created a website called Across Borders, a digital experience to showcase both unique diversities and fundamental similarities between countries in the music they listen to and more. Through this website, you can explore the trending music in any country along with their neighboring ones. According to you, what is the role music plays in connecting people from different cultures across borders? And can it play a part towards a more inclusive world?
Wow, great. Yeah, cool. So you're referring to music as a weapon. That's kind of a sad thing to think about, you know. And the reverse, where it's actually a medium for empathy, is what's important, and I think that's what you're alluding to in your question. How would you best increase, empathy? I love the idea that you could help with exposure to other people's, world and world of being through sharing music, because somehow music is a bit more universal sometimes than the than some of the other things that we share. I mean, obviously there's less and less difficulty with speaking through different languages because we have translating applications and things like that. That's great, but those are, there's still kind of a level of remove there, if the exchange is mediated by, language that still has a step that it has to take, where music doesn't have that. If it's able to get through, it doesn't have to go through a translator. I don't think I know how you would do that anyway. But it always, when it does communicate, it does it directly. We were talking about noise, earlier. So I make a comparison there. For someone who tunes out another's music, you could imagine, oh, that's just noise, right? That you hear people refuse somebody else's music because it sounds like noise to them. And the John Cage quote that you made, Anushka, was one about, all sound becoming music. What if we just looked at music that's been sort of, somehow labeled as noise, and then we say, what does it take to make it unnoisy? It's the same thing that the John Cage sort of ear-opening illusion would teach us, I think, which is that you open your ears to, the music of others. It's kind of on the receiving side, if you get my meaning. So it's a way of being where you're receptive and you've opened your ears. Now, in your cross-border idea, where you can provide a channel for that, I'd almost like to throw the question back to you. How do you imagine, on the receiving side of that channel, sort of encouraging someone to open their ears to be appreciative of something new, something, foreign, let's call it? But as soon as they kind of do allow that in, then that empathy starts to take off, and that's really exciting. So if just maybe you could talk about it a little bit. I'd love to hear it. And what I would imagine is, first of all, the fact that somebody goes to your site and says, I would like to participate, is already an indication that they want to open themselves. So do you have any ideas about that yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I always felt that the music I listen to and the music that my friends listen to is very limited to like the artists that we've heard of. And I really wanted to use music as a way of connecting people across the world, and like, exposing the cultures of so many different places that we're not very aware of. So that's what led me to build across borders. So using Google Maps, you can like see exactly where you're standing in the world. and then listen to like the top music there, as well as the neighboring countries, and then you can really
Awesome.
compare.
Keep going. I just have to go get my power supply. It's right around the corner. I can hear you. So yeah, tell me a little more about how many how far have you taken?
You can go to like almost any country in the world, yeah, and you get all the music from that country and its neighboring countries.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. That's awesome. Anushka, why would it be important for someone? What happens if someone does that? Let's say, like around, I think a lot of people in the room would remember around like 10 years ago, a lot of, we work in a lot of villages and they all start getting Pakistani TV in India, right? And one of the first things that my villagers would say is they look exactly like us and they listen to the same songs. That's crazy because people just didn't even know that. And what does that do?
Yeah, I think it just opens up a whole new perspective on how similar cultures can be across the world, and from music to like a whole lot more stuff. So, yeah.
Amazing. I think we've lost Chris. Just I think wait for him to come back. But yeah.
I think his computer died.
Yeah. It's okay. It's okay.
Just message him, tell him that don't stress, because when your computer dies during a call, it's a very, very hassling 5 minutes to get back onto that call.
Yeah, my comp died too. I'm on my phone.
I feel like we're getting a masterclass in music. Like his description of the string and it being cut and coming back. 1 second. I'll just say. So after this, Nirvaan, you'll ask your question. I'll just say hi, Professor. I think we lost you there. Oh, he's already back. Nice. Hi, Chris.
I apologize.
All good, all good, all good. I think Chris, can we go on for maybe just 20 more minutes? I think everyone's getting a little tired, so I think we'll just go for 20 minutes, have a couple more questions, and I also want to be really respectful of your time. Would that be okay? Is that okay with you?
That's fine for me, and I apologize. It was a good break where you could take a assessment.
We were just chatting about all these incredible insights you've given us, and I personally have been teaching Anushka and Nirvaan for a bit, and they're huge fans, and they're incredible lovers of music. So I can only imagine how happy they are right now. But I just want to be cognizant of everyone's time. Nirvaan, you have a question?
Sure. So I think we've definitely covered the plethora of natural examples of music in our everyday lives. You've talked about the musification of several natural phenomena. But I wanted to shift gears and talk a bit about the ability kind of music to develop emotional and cognitive skills, since we've just explored music as a medium of cultural communication. I think Anushka brought up a fantastic point about that. I had mentioned that I'd run a music therapy program that helps special needs children develop cognitive, communicative, and physical skills through research-based songs that I've composed. And I've personally studied this effect of tonality, scale choice, different meters, and lyrical content like call and response songs or memorization songs. And all of these indicate, to varying degrees, some direct correlation between musical structures and developing the brains of children, especially ones with special needs. My question to you is if you or CCRMA have done any research in this area of musical therapy and its positive impact on the human brain and behavior, something that might help someone like me deepen my understanding of the power of music therapy. That depth of music therapy research like mine may substantially benefit from the kinds of resources you might have at an institute at Science dedicated to computer science and music research, something I might not be able to replicate at home.
Yeah, great. Okay, so first of all, like I confess this isn't actually my main area of work. I am fortunate though to have nearby colleagues who are deeply involved with not just music therapy and practice, but also the as you are the question about what is the likely efficacy for using music to sort of increase the well-being of folks, and particularly if someone's got needs that could be ameliorated somehow, and to learn where those attributes, where those advantages might lie. So the first person we've already mentioned, Dr. Fujioka. Takako Fujioka is specialist in music and the brain. At our center, when she joined our faculty, we were fortunate to be able to build what we're calling the Neuromusic Lab at this point. And the Neuromusic Lab, it had to have some special equipment, but more importantly, it had to kind of from the bottom up sort of bring a curriculum and a research program into our center that everything that we hoped for. And I go by first name. So Takako is first of all, a brilliant and rigorous scientist. When she's investigating something, it has this level of substantiation from experimentation that makes it a way to sort of found your knowledge on a known point and move it forward. And in the world of music, that's a difficult thing to do. Music is so many things to people. Our brains are different. We're often asking questions about things that are interior experiences, and how do you certainly there's a whole world of reflection that we can look at in music theory and the humanities. But if we're taking a scientific approach, data-based, where experimentation is the method, it's it often involves, as we were talking about, EEG or even more fancy equipment, which is doing farther and further afield brain scans in real time. There's methods for that, the fMRI, magnetic resonance imaging for functional experiments, or MEG, which is magnetoencephalography, which is a very fancy brainwave device that's very, the ones online right now require, I think, liquid helium to cool them. I mean, they're it's crazy contraptions, but they're all going to get smaller and smaller, like I was indicating earlier. So those directions of inquiry in the kind of biomedical way about music, those would be kind of directions that are associated with what we have going on at our center. But there are a lot of places where in our lab also that and I got to say, our lab is sort of large. It's like 300 participants right now. So among them, there's another direction, which is let's learn about it by doing it. In terms of working with participants who would like to collaborate in music, and particularly trying to adapt and make accessible the tools for making music and making music together. So there's a realm of building physically operating instruments that you can explore to put musical performance in the hands of people who would otherwise have difficulties, and those challenges can be overcome by really interesting, innovative engineering, right? So building expressive musical devices, controllers, if you will, which are musical instruments, using all of the fun engineering projects that you can imagine, and 3D printers and small electronics and Raspberry Pis. All of a sudden, now you got this instrument that can be very, very finely adapted to the circumstances of an individual, right? So that's another direction to go. I'm just starting to help with some people in Canada who are doing singing as therapy. The fact that, you know, we know from that realm of literature that there's no, you know, as far as I know, and again, I haven't read all the literature, so it's not my area, but I would say that there's probably a very well-founded side of understanding that says singing is really good for us. You know, we like to do things, and for me, so are string quartets or other things. I mean, we like to synchronize, we like to do things together, and it has advantages, right? I think if we posit that, okay, that's a starting point. Now, how do you increase the access to that? The project in Canada is trying to do this as a nationwide study with lots of choruses, lots of research professors who are then looking at the activity and the well-being and working with folks in therapeutic situations to see if the application of what they learn in, you know, in the research can be actually brought into practice. One of the things that's a very, very interesting new pharmacological way to do this research is literally you spit. So, you know, when someone, you know, when you're trying to assess someone's emotional state, their well-being, there are real-time what do you call it? Indicators of some kind that are present in the chemical analysis of your saliva immediately, right? So this is a new approach being used in sort of music and emotion, you know, to see the state of being, you know, in a kind of rigorous way, right? Like, so I asked these people, they said they were going to use our software for connecting choirs from home, kind of thing I was talking about earlier before my battery died. And I asked them, I said, so are you going to have are you having your participants spit? And they said, yep, that's what we're doing. I was, you know, so I'm learning too, you know, it's apparently a means towards, you know, actually making, you know, sort of validating some of the therapeutic interventions, right? So, you know, you know, it's pretty clear that I'm talking about very demonstrable things that I've seen, you know, but I think there's a whole world here to be researched beyond what I know that I would suggest you just keep going on. And again, the fascination with this ties into some of the folks we were talking about earlier. So Pauline Oliveras started you know, an experimental musical instrument design project in New York State, which was working with you know, folks in different clinics up and down the state, trying to get them to be able to play music together. So the fascination ties into musical experimentation really closely. That's why we have some amount of that, I think, in our group at Stanford. And the fact that you're doing it there, it's accessible to do worldwide, you know, and that's great.
Yeah, that's really what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to democratize, like you had put it, the access to musical therapy.
Yep.
Of course, I'm studying a specific facet of musical therapy, which is for children with special needs. But of course, that musical therapy, just the way I've kind of designed it, really applies to any kind of developing human. And yeah, so the way I saw it fit to kind of spread that message across was through computer science, was through coding. I thought that if you could take a program like teacher training, something you would classically do in person, you'd go and you teach teachers how to teach these songs. If you could put that into a code form, if you could somehow give instructions real time to teachers on how to teach each of these songs that develop, you know, a multiple array of skills, that would make it really easy to democratize access to musical therapy, because all they have to do is open an app and they've got access to all of these instructions on teaching their students and developing their emotional ranges. And if you pair that with like an evaluation form, something like that, that really puts it all together quite nicely.
Nice. Yeah, cool. Side note, the web audio API is super, super convenient for, this idea of spreading something as far and wide as possible, making it accessible in the computer's accessibility sense of the word. Rather, there's two words or two meanings for accessible in this realm. One is it accessible on your, to anybody to run on their computer? And the web audio API allows all of the programming to happen in the browser. And you turn your browser into a synthesizer, and it's JavaScript, it's open source, and several billion browsers are running web audio. So that's accessibility of one kind. The other accessibility is what do you attach to your computer to manipulate sound? And that's going to depend very much on the affordances of, the machinery to a particular individual, right? So if you need to adapt something to make it work for, eye tracking, for example, if you have if you have a participant whose mobility is restricted and yet they can do, eye motion, Pauline Oliveris's work had actually some of that in it. So you can connect your coding in a way that's ubiquitously accessible computer-wise and tailored accessibility to individuals who have special needs.
Absolutely.
That's super exciting. Yeah.
Thank you. Anushka, did you have any other question you wanted to ask the professor?
Yes. Thank you, Nirvaan. So the recent discourse on NFTs is fascinating in the way it can potentially empower creators. But recently, I interviewed Professor Alexander Nemerov from Stanford's Art School, who described the NFT space as extremely commercial, individualistic, and less focused on the idea of communal experience of creating art. Where do you stand vis-a-vis the view on NFTs and their potential to change the way we listen and distribute music?
Oh, wow. What a great question. It's super timely. An ex-student of mine and, who was a professor in a university in Georgia, then retired from that, had sold a company to Smule, which is an online music app, and then took off, started a couple of other companies, is now in this space. And I'm learning from Parag Chordia, his name, and about exactly this question. And I don't, it's almost like check back with me in 3 weeks. I'll have more to say. But right now, my guess is that if I understand the proposal here, is that NFTs in music is ephemeral, right? Music is different than the plastic arts that have objects that you can hold in your hand, but NFTs are ephemeral in a sense too, and they aren't something you hold in your hand. If there becomes some kind of value in, an NFT representation of either a performance or a composition or a result of a composition, whatever it is, if that tag happens and it has value and there's a corresponding channel of sort of that value getting back to the artist, then that's a really revolutionary thing, which is different than where we are right now for creative artists. So musicians who are stuck in the kind of like Spotify world, where that's the only, SoundCloud, Spotify, whatever your means of distribution is, those are all companies that are really working from a kind of, what I kind of imagine a sort of slice of industry in the moment in time that we're in right now, where, okay, they can kind of manipulate how those markets go. But in a way, the NFT thing might be, it might just be this outlier that pops things wide open and allows a different kind of remuneration and incentivizes artists in a different way than you get right now. 1 decade to the next day to the next day, this whole thing of record labels becoming whatever has just completely changed, digitally. If you do it in a decade kind of rhythm, you can see the consternation and the panic. But music hasn't gone away, it's increased. And is it going to increase more when you add even more personalized means for, sort of this kind of value accretion thing? I'm fascinated. What do you think? I mean, do you have any sense of it yourself? I'm really curious, because now I'm in this conversation with others. I don't know, Neshka, do you have any thoughts about that?
I've very recently started reading up about NFTs, and I think it's a pretty cool advancement in the future of art and music, and I think it's a way to get more people interested in investing in both art and music. Yeah.
Yeah. So my wife June was, she's kind of listening. She's really fascinated by this too. It's like, maybe it's a boutique collector thing at the beginning, but maybe that's just at the beginning. Who knows how this thing goes when it goes crazy. So I think it's one of the things to watch. Anyway, and you're watching it, which is great. I'm glad you mentioned it. And like I said, feel free to check back with me, because I'm gonna really learn more, I think, pretty soon about it. And nobody knows the answer. That's really key. This is a world right now of total discovery. What is this thing? Cool.
I did have a question about this topic on on security and authentication of NFTs, because if you look at digital NFTs, which is what's conventional, there's a quantifiable way you can make sure that what you have is legitimate. The piece of art that you have, you can check it, and there are these softwares, these multi-factor authentication softwares, I think that's what they're called, that make sure that this image that you've got, or of this piece of art that you've got, is the legitimate thing. I'm wondering if you start to consider sound over image, the way you would try and secure something like that. I mean, it's not a question of which one is more rip-offable. I mean, you can take a screenshot of an NFT, and it's this recurring joke that, look, I've got $1 million in my phone because I took a screenshot of an NFT. But I think same thing could happen with music, but I'm wondering, how do you create that, in terms of code? How would you secure, a piece of music or a composition? How would you know it's legitimate? I think that's
right. And so the question is, when you do the phone picture, do you have the NFT? You don't, right? That's not it. But this perceived value of the person that paid to own it is the key to where this is. It's sort of like creating another currency that is totally out of thin air. Right, but it's not out of thin air because it's tagged to this work of art. And in music, to answer your question, this same thing came along when all of a sudden you could digitally transmit the master copy, so-called, of something, a result of a studio project. Okay, so you have the main project that came out of Abbey Road for the Beatles. You've got this, tape that's the one. Well, if you made a digital, if you transferred it and now it's digital, then the next digital copy could be exactly the same, right? And you lose the you lose the ability to, what they used to keep in the vault. Say that's the value. Well, so horribly, there were, and this was actually in the Audio Engineering Society. There were standards for how do you then watermark the digital copy of the valuable one, so that you could say that this is a pirated ripoff. And there were different ways of doing that. The horrible one was called copy code. And it's fun to look at the history of this. They said, okay, there's a part of our hearing where the sound, it wouldn't matter if you put a huge steep filter notch in the sound right here at this frequency that would be kind of less than audible, right? And so we have scientifically discovered that particular frequency doesn't matter. So we're going to just like put a notch in all of the copy-coded authentic, versions. Well, the scientific proof wasn't there. It messed with the sound of cymbals, and so it was damaging the original artifact. And it was just another moment of like, how do we deal with this problem? And that was a really terrible solution. So watch out for terrible solutions.
I like though that you brought up the analogy of currency with NFTs, because it's interesting that like paper notes, they don't have any inherent value. It's just you're promising to pay the amount that's written on the note. And I guess that's the way NFTs are valued. Like you were saying, it's simply what a buyer is willing to pay for something digital. That can be a piece of music, it can be a pixelated image. But yeah, I like that analogy of currency. I think it works well. But yeah, watermarking music, that's tough, but it's interesting to see, because we don't have really a very developed selection of music NFTs. So I don't think the standard is there yet. You have a standard for digital NFTs, but I'm wondering, or maybe I don't really know enough about it, but I do want to learn about that.
Cool. Yeah. Well, like I said, stay in touch. If anybody's interested in this, and like I'm close to someone who's working on it. So
right.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Professor. I think it's been an incredible, 1.5, 2 hours we've been speaking with you. Thank you for being so generous with your time. It means the world to us. Any final thoughts, Anushka and Nirvaan?
I just want to say thank you. It's definitely, like Manu was saying, it is a masterclass to hear from a professor of your caliber speak about a topic that I myself and Anushka, of course, are both very interested in. And I'm definitely going to be implementing some of these suggestions that you provided, especially for that music therapy research. I think, there's definitely some more that I can find on. You were talking about those choirs and measuring that chemical content in spit. That was just very interesting. So that's definitely something to research, even if it doesn't apply necessarily to what I'm doing. It's just something that's cool to know.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been really great, and like reading up about all your work and this whole new field of music and technology. I think it's really interesting. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, you're totally wonderful to get to meet, and thank you for your questions. I mean, this has been wonderful for me too, and I love the informal nature of this get together, the Manu, that you've pioneered. This is a really fun format, and I didn't feel like I had to prepare a whole lecture and put it out there, but in the end, I got more across than I ever would have if I did try to like pre-plan what I was going to present. So it's, kudos to all of you, and, good luck with your studies. And I will just make an open invitation to anybody, anyone who's here today, for sure, get in touch. If you have any further questions or interest in, our center at Stanford. One thing I could mention, actually, this is quite operational in a sense, is that you might think of coming to Stanford in the summer to do a workshop. We give kind of to the general public, we have workshops that are like 1 or 2 weeks long every summer. Those workshops started, I think, in 1969. So it's a very long tradition of doing this. So it's not for Stanford students per se, it's for the general world. And if you want to come be in residence, we will be open for business this summer. I'm absolutely sure of it. It'll be in person. And the topics they touch on some of the things we talked about today, and then there's many more. And since they're only 1 or 2 weeks each, there's probably going to be like 10 of these topics taught in the summer. And there's small groups, 10 people come attend or something like that. So you can find out about those through the CCRMA website. So by probably March or so, those topics will be enumerated, and you can inquire more. So that's a really good way to get involved directly if you want. It's also a good way to see Stanford and California and all those things. So
is this the same thing as the Stanford pre-collegiate programs, or is that?
It's different. It's different. Yeah. So this is entirely from CCRMA itself. Yeah. Thank you, Manu. That's the link right there. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And so that'll get populated, with the new classes by late winter, I think, something like that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So if you do that, we'll see you. Great.
It's the most beautiful like place on campus, especially the sunset from Chris's balcony. I have lots of fond memories of it setting by the just so beautiful. It's just absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah. It's a funny story. It was the mansion built by the president sometime after the founding of the university. Then it became the music department. And then the music department it got its own new building, and this funny group of computer and music people kind of took the leftovers, which was this wonderful building, and we renovated it, and we got studios and all this good stuff. Right. So we're happy to.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day, Chris. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, you all take care too. Yeah, good to have a chance to meet y'all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.